All right, good afternoon, guys. How you doing?
Not too
I'm
bad.
good.
All
Yeah.
right, today we're going to be looking at Sinner, Sacrifice for Redemption. We had already done this video, but I, like a moron, did not hit record. So here we are the very next day, hoping to recreate this conversation.
He is squat.
A couple of the brass facts here. Game is a Souls-like. That is a boss rush. It's just no grinding, no exploration, no customization or upgrading. You get into like a central hub, you go into different boss arenas and you fight them. The gimmick is that every battle you do, you have to sacrifice a predetermined part of your repertoire. So one might be that like when you use all your fatigue or stamina, you're fatigued for a second. Another one might be a reduction to your max health, max stamina. Your shield breaks if you block too much damage, and then they carry with you. So you actually get worse as you go through the game. It was
Eh,
released in 2018, and it retails for 18.99 Canadian.
Okay. And I don't remember if you mentioned this exactly, but each boss has like their detriment that they give to you.
Yeah, it's
Like it's
predetermined,
specified.
so it's not like
Okay.
you choose. Like if you go into this boss arena, it'll permanently reduce um, your attack power, and if
Okay.
you finish that fight, you will have that permanent loss to attack power for the rest of your run, like the rest of your campaign. So part of the strategy would be what order you want to do it in. So like you might
Yeah.
be worse off fighting this melee boss, but doing it early when you don't have like six other negatives against you to go against. When you kill a boss, you can choose to like fully kill them. Like you can keep attacking them after the fight and essentially destroy them. And I think you get a boost to your overall health by doing that, or you can set them
Oh, okay.
free, which is the only thing you can improve on is your overall health if you choose to do it. But of course, the final boss, which is the eighth boss after the seven sins, has like two forms, and one of them requires you to like go in there without any of those additional health. So it's kind of your pick. So every
Yeah.
boss, as like this first arena that I'm running into, has like a stylized intro to the boss fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I really like the stylized intro. I really like the style of it. Uh, I I think it's kind of neat that there's just a little story, but it doesn't take up too much time because a game like this sort of lets you basically just do one thing, right? If many games have so many different parts to them that, if you don't like one part, for instance, in Dark Souls, if you don't like the sort of platforming, getting through all the exploration of it, and you just like the boss fights, uh, you're putting up with a lot of stuff that you might not like to get to the parts you don't. In this case, all you have to like is the boss fights, and you're getting just that.
Yeah, like if you're somebody like me who just recently finished Neo, for example, where with Neo I loved the level design and the exploration, but I didn't like any of the boss fights. You might not be as tempted to try this one because all you're getting is the boss fights.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you like the strategic elements of learning an attack pattern, just bare bones get into the big battles, not, worrying about what stats you're going to up or this or that. You just want to jump into the action, this might be a better choice.
Yeah. And I mean, I always liked the boss fights in the Souls games because I feel that they had the most, like they always had the most strategy compared to just fighting regular enemies, right? And not that I didn't like the exploration, but I definitely think the bosses were very unique. So this already appeals to me.
Now, what do you guys think of what we're seeing for the graphic style here?
So I do like the textures overall. In the first area, I kind of liked it a little bit better. It had a little bit more blending. Here, some of like the pillars and stuff, they're a little too like shiny for me, and they stand out. Not that it's like a terrible thing, but
Also slightly phallic looking.
yeah, a little bit.
I imagine that's intentional.
And I really like the texture like on his armor and stuff. Like you can see the shine of the gear, right?
Yeah, I like that there's enough contrast, and even though it's a very dark palette, there's more than enough telegraphed between projectiles and the movements to give you all the information you need to basically make your success or failure entirely on you rather than on any fault in the game itself.
Yeah.
Which is very important for a game like this.
So what you're saying is like things like that eyeball attack we saw him do, like you can really see the orange flames around it, which obviously gives you a little bit more of an indicator to dodge, get out of the way, because here it comes again. You can see it like almost against the dull palette, and first death. You'll see a lot of deaths.
Shouldn't have sucked so bad there, Jesus.
Well, a bit of a spoiler. This video is entirely shots of me dying against bosses.
Oh, okay.
No
success, huh?
No. And no. Who wants to see that?
Nobody wants to see that.
That actually makes me think of another point. Depending on how good you are at depending on how good you are at something like these boss fights, can really determine how much playtime you get out of this game. Because there is only 7 bosses representing the 7 sins, which I guess is part of its mythos, and then the final, like, overarching 8th boss. So, like, if you're somebody who's very experienced at these Souls-like games, and you are, you know, quite good at pattern recognition and getting into these boss fights, you know, if you're the kind of person who runs in and one-shots bosses in Dark Souls, you probably won't get a lot of playtime out of this, but for the average gamer, you're looking at 7 to 8 hours, maybe?
Yeah.
It feels like there might be a bit of a missed opportunity there then.
Death number 2.
To use the boss, the losses you get for challenging bosses to your health and all that, they could have used that as almost a challenge mode, rather than actually part of the game, to make it a little easier perhaps for some players to get through it, but also to give more experienced players a challenge of their own making.
True, but that also means that the first playthrough, if you're not losing anything, could be even quicker, because now you're going into every fight with your full gamut of abilities. Like, you think about it, by the time you've done 3 or 4 bosses, you might be missing your buffs, your shield, your health, because, I mean, the game starts you off with 2 of these flaming sword buffs, which actually do damage to yourself as well, 7 healing potions, 20 lightning javelins, 7, like, fire bomb thingies, a 2-handed sword, and then a 1-handed sword and a shield. And that's all you're going to get for the rest of the game. And from that point on, you're actually going to lose these things rather than gain any new ones.
Yeah. I think if you want to challenge yourself, it would be more on maybe what order you're fighting them in, right? Because there's probably an order that is overall a little bit easier and an order that's harder, right?
One, I think I'm just kind of pointing out that the playtime is low because you don't have all that exploration.
Yeah,
I gotta say, I really like the water effects and
oh yeah, this looks great. Like, look at the lava.
But the human faces on the character and on that girl that you were just fighting don't look right.
Well, I mean, you barely have a face. You can kind of just be, you're just kind of glowing eyes behind a
I think that's
helmet.
probably the worst part of the graphical part. Like, these monsters look pretty awesome, but the human looking face, like, maybe they should have just made her face like shaded so it looks dark rather than trying to put that, because it looks kind of not right.
Yeah, and I mean, if that's not your highlight, like, if you're not great at programming faces, don't program them, right? Like, hide your flaws, which I think overall you don't get too much in this game, because all of the bosses, minus the one that was
cool.
the lust boss, don't really have human faces, right?
Yeah, this one looks really cool.
Yeah, this is a sweet one. I assume this is Wrath?
Yes, sir. And, like, obviously the one before the female was Lust. I'm not entirely sure what all of them are.
What was the Knight? Because I originally thought the Knight might have been
Pride
Wrath until I saw this one, but...
I think it's
Might not
Pride.
have been
I think
Pride.
he's even called like Proud Road or whatever his name is.
Okay.
So, and I mean, like, obviously,
Oh goodness.
all of the fights are well done mechanically. Like, they're all thought
Yeah.
out. Graphically, it's done well. I think it's just, though, when you do something bare bones like this, which is a boss rush, which, I mean, think of how many games you've played in the past where boss rush is its own mode after you've beaten the game.
Yeah.
It's going to appeal to a very specific audience, right?
See,
Like,
I remember Alex mentioned yesterday, like, Shadow of the Colossus, which, I mean, is one of my favorite games, just because each boss is kind of like a puzzle, right? So I kind of take it like that, where maybe these bosses are meant to be more like puzzles than they are just like a boss by itself.
I also wonder if this is almost this is probably one of the first games this company's made, or maybe even the first game. I imagine. But I imagine this might also be sort of like a demo, a testing the waters type thing, and they might even eventually attempt to make like a more full game with this type of like with what they've learned here.
well, it's
Because
developed by a company.
if this was a full like Dark Souls style game, that could be very cool too.
It's done by a company called Dark Star, and just doing a quick search, it looks like they've only done 2 games. One prior to this one called Abyss Raiders Uncharted, and then this one. And I mean, even
so
this
they're
one...
still a fairly kind of small new company, right? They don't have a lot under their belt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't find anything else, and I mean, this one came out in 2018. So maybe they're working on something that's going to come out next, but
Yeah.
this is what we got. So we're getting kind of close to the end of this video here as we watch me die to another fight. So we're going to get to that new question that I'm going to be putting into this series and ask you, do you continue after the first opinion?
So, I mean, for me, I know I mentioned yesterday, at that price point, definitely. I would definitely play this.
It has a
20 bucks is-
historical low on the PSN, because I have a add-on on my browser for this that tells you this, of $10. It's the lowest it's been on the store is $10 Canadian.
If it goes down to 10 again, hell yeah, for sure. I love the aesthetic. I love the gameplay so far that I'm seeing. I would definitely pay $10 for this.
I'd consider $10 for this as well. I, for one, really like the RPG aspects and all the other stuff that goes into a game like this. Boss rush isn't really my type of thing, but because it's short, if it was short and cheap, I would definitely consider picking up something like this.
I'm actually going to go with a not continue after first opinion.
Okay.
Like, I played a bunch of it, few sessions just getting ready for this video, and I don't really want to boot it up again. Simply because, as I pointed out, when it comes to these types of games, the boss fights are like my least favorite part. I like the world exploration, I like the leveling. To me, it almost feels like the bosses in a lot of these games, like even in Dark Souls, I'm usually just summoning someone to get through them because they're more just like roadblocks to the more immersive feel that I get where I just like drown myself in the aesthetic of the game.
And I could definitely see if you can't get through it because there's no way to either summon people or like level up, get items. This game could be extremely frustrating.
All right,
Gotta get good.
those are our thoughts. We'll see you guys on the next episode.
Hey, did you like that video? If you did, be sure to let us know by clicking the like button and leaving a comment. If you want to be first in line for any new content, be sure to subscribe to our channel and then hit up our Facebook page. The link's in the description below to see what's coming up next.